Hello, and welcome to this panel discussion on transforming your labs with cutting-edge AI solutions, supported by Thermo Fisher. My name is Warren Clark. I'm CEO of Europa Science, which is home to the platform Scientific Computing World. We help scientists and engineers learn how to create optimum computing environments to support their research goals. Over the next hour or so, I'll be asking our expert panel about a range of issues surrounding the use of AI and machine learning in the laboratory environment. It's a panel discussion, so we'll be keeping things free-flowing, and that means plenty of opportunities for those of you joining us live today to contribute. On your screens, you'll see an option to submit a question or comment. You can do this at any time, and we'll endeavour to find time to address them during the session. So let's meet the panel. Joining us today are Michael Raab, R&D Site Lead at Thermo Fisher, and Catherine Webley, Research Fellow in Chemical Biology at Queen's University, Belfast. I'll ask them to tell you a bit more about themselves as we tackle our first topic. We'll also be weaving in some contributions from other experts, gleaned from some recent interviews we've run in Scientific Computing World. You can read these interviews in full on our website, scientific-computing.com, where you'll also find a section dedicated to laboratory informatics. Catherine, let's start with you and tell us a bit about your role at Queen's University and where you're at on your journey with AI.
That's good. I'll just share my slides. Sorry, that took a second. Can you see my slides all right?
Yes, we can, yeah.
Okay, perfect. Sorry for the delay. Okay, so hi everyone. So my name's Catherine. So my background's in chemistry. So I did a degree in chemistry with drug discovery at the University of Strathclyde. And then I actually went to Saudi Arabia and I looked at organic semiconducting polymers for biosensing applications. And then moving on from there, I did a PhD in single molecule biophysics. So you can see that my background is really quite varied. And now I'm a research fellow in chemical biology at Queen's University, Belfast. So I think, throughout the different projects which I've done, there's actually been quite a lot of opportunities for AI, but I think we'll get into that a bit more in the discussion. So my kind of main research themes are antimicrobial resistance, looking at covalent inhibitors, membrane biophysics, and molecular modeling and molecular design strategies. So I think one of the biggest areas where AI is really useful for us is in drug discovery, because you can really expand the scope and the breadth of the projects that you can do. Because obviously, in a laboratory setting, I would say that for the kind of tests that we're doing, we can probably test about 100 compounds. Whereas if you would do that in silico, particularly with AI tools, then you could do that on the scale of thousands.
Okay. Great. We'll dig into a bit of that as we go on. Michael, can you tell us a bit about your role at Thermo?
Absolutely. Thank you, Clark. Hopefully my screen is coming through.
Yep.
Cool. My name is Michal Raab. I'm located from Bratislava, Slovakia, the sunny city that you can see from behind of me. My role in Thermo Fisher is leading one of the software engineering team who essentially provides software to support our analytical chemistry hardware business, more specifically mass spectrometry and chromatography. Within the team, I'm also responsible for leading an exploratory program focusing on how to leverage innovative technologies in our product portfolio to support our customers mainly on the discovery journey. My main interest is in the small molecule discovery process. I'm having a PhD on physical chemistry, and for the past number of years, I have been working on algorithm development and data processing to enable the discovery process of small molecules. Thank you. Back to you, Clark.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to go into our first question now, which is about the the best ways of using AI in a laboratory environment. So I'm just going to start by quoting from an interview that we carried out recently in Scientific Computing World. This comes from Ramindapal Singh of Incubate Bio. So, sorry, that's the wrong slide. Let's go back one. Here we are. This is Ruben Harwood from Gartner, who talks about the fact that machine learning has been around for a while, but there's been a huge growth in AI in the last couple of years, and it's mostly applied in sort of large language models. And I think, Catherine, you touched on this a little bit with what you said about how you're using it, and also that it can be used in clinical trials as well. Now, I know that's not your area of expertise, but that's kind of where AI can play a huge part in life sciences in general. So, Catherine, you're sort of on the cusp of adopting AI in a sort of a major way, if you like. So where do you think, if you can expand on what you said before, where do you think is going to make the biggest difference for you in the work that you do?
I feel like this is something which, we could talk about for hours, but if I would answer concisely, first of all, yes, back to what I was saying about actually the scope of the types of compounds which you can screen. If you're interested in drug discovery, as I said, experimentally, if you are testing everything yourself by hand, it's going to take a really long time. So one of the things which I think we're quite interested in our research group at the moment is an AI tool called Deep Mirror, which we've seen. And the way that works is you can actually input experimental data as well as computational data. So say, for example, you have a molecule which you're interested in, and you think, this might be useful as a drug, for example, then you can actually put in experimental data and then get that to essentially come up with novel targets. But I think maybe the other thing as well, so during my PhD, I was actually analyzing a lot of data by hand, which was very time consuming, and looking through things by eye and kind of trying to pick out what's interesting and significant and what might be an artifact of the instrument setup is very tricky. But if you had an AI tool to do that for you, then you could really just hone in on the details that you're looking for. Yes, I think it's to do with speed, efficiency, and essentially the scope of the research that you can get done. And maybe even
given your area of research, you presumably sort of talk to other researchers at other institutions and things like that on a sort of reasonably regular basis. Have you seen deployment of, are you coveting their use of tools elsewhere that you've seen you'd like to use and can see the benefits?
I think this is one of those things that's quite early on. So at the moment, I think everyone's kind of just thinking like, where should we start? Okay. But I think it's also about leadership, isn't it? I think once the first person starts using it and we see the benefits of it, that's kind of going to start leading towards more and more people taking it up. I mean, already one thing that we're quite interested in is AlphaFold. So AlphaFold shows us essentially like predicted protein structures. And actually having access to these protein structures is quite new for us in our research group. And that's even amazing because, if you want to model how small molecules interact with proteins, of course, you need the 3D structure of the protein.
Okay. Michael, so, from your perspective, you're on the kind of, platform provision side, I guess, how is sort of AI feeding into the platforms you're developing, and, what kind of requests are you getting? What benefits are people requiring?
Mm-hmm. So when I think about it, I could see from implementation of the AI tool, and I'm saying very generic AI tool because this could represent tools of very different scopes and purposes. But I could take the perspective of a lab as a whole, where I definitely see opportunity for using AI to just streamline the whole process from the lab perspective. And that could mean streamlining and making more efficient, essentially what Catherine mentioned, but at various levels. It could start really from streamlining the experimental setup, starting from the instrument and from the measurements. It could mean things like predictive maintenance to ensure sufficient uptime and uninterrupted operations of the instrumentation in the lab. It could mean interoperability and decision-making during the data collection, during the experiments. It could mean also ensuring the overall data integrity that comes out of the lab and ensuring the consistency, integrity, and also compliance from the regulatory standpoint. So there are definitely, I mean, AI tools is fascinating due to the versatility where it could be applied. This is the one lens. The other lens is, I guess, more closer to what Catherine was describing. This is how, from a scientific point of view, where I see the opportunities where AI helps in the products. And one that already has mentioned is the ability to AI to supplement some of our, I would say, fundamental models to understand and to interpret how kind of the physical and chemical science actually works. The mentioned, for instance, AlphaFold, the theory for how to utilize molecular modeling to simulate protein folding has been around for many years. But really, the ability when AI came into place was to create approximation at the level where suddenly calculations were possible at a scale where we could start interpreting really biological events or biological observations. It's very similar to structure-activity relationships when we are talking about chemical properties of, say, small molecules, where you can go down to an arbitrary level of theory, potentially down to the quantum mechanics. But then it turns out that the complexity of those calculations are very impractical for the typical scientific studies that we do today. So at some point of the theory, the AI enables us to take, I don't want to say shortcuts, but approximations that suddenly, where suddenly we can start to interpret the behavior around us. So in the construction and simplifying of the physical models that we are using to interpret the data, I see a huge opportunity for AI. And of course, there are many more examples for smaller tools that going from, like, I would say, more on the more practical level, doing the scientific research and just doing the data collection, doing the data analysis and correction of errors in the measurements data, looking into anomaly detection and statistical analysis. So there's definitely a lot of things from the scientific point of view where we could leverage such technologies.
Okay, so there's a lot of time saving, I guess, is the principal benefit you talked about there. That's a very short version of your answer, but you know, we're talking about saving time here, right? So, okay, let's move on to the next question, which is about the barriers to adoption. So again, Catherine talked about, you know, things that may prevent, you know, if you're not the first mover, et cetera, et cetera. So here is the previewed slide from before that I showed you. This is about significant barriers to AI adoption. So from the viewpoint of Raminder Pal Singh, he's saying that actually it's change, you know, resistance to change is a bit of an issue. Just that that's more of a cultural thing rather than a technical or a cost thing. And a bit of cynicism maybe towards AI is that you know, those the early adopters were like, well, it's not quite of solved the problems that we wanted it to solve. So his suggestion is, you know, from a researcher's point of view, how is it going to benefit me? That's the question that he would ask. So Catherine, you're sort of in the throes of trying to persuade some budget to come your way to kind of start using AI. What are the barriers in your organization to adopting it?
I think there are a few things. So, for example, in academic institutions, often you have postdoctoral researchers like myself who might be there for short periods of time, so 1 to 3 years, for example. So I think any AI interface which we would start integrating in the lab, it really needs to be very user-friendly so that as the skills and experience change, that remains accessible. I think maybe some of the other barriers are as well are costs, right? So if you want to make a significant investment in an AI tool, then you really want to know that you've chosen the correct tool for your specific application. And a lot of research groups will have very different, very niche research areas. So I do think, like, if you're going to make an investment like that, you want to know that you've chosen the right tool which can really meet your needs. And I suppose maybe the third point as well is to do with data validation. So I think if you are going to do an AI tool, one of the kind of common mantras is if you put junk in, you get junk out. So if, for example, you want to do it for drug discovery or library screening of small molecules, if, for example, you start with a library which is not very good, perhaps you can be then biasing the tool to give you compounds back which aren't going to work when really you need to broaden your scope. So yeah, I think those would be kind of the three key points.
Okay, and is there, so the quote that we had up before talked about sort of cultural resistance. Do you get any sense of that? I mean, you said there's a high turnover of people, I guess, but it's probably less a case of cultural resistance in a educational establishment than maybe in a commercial one. I don't know. Is that true or?
Yeah, well, it'll be interesting to see Michael's perspective on this, but I think for us, because also we're working with students, right? So we also have undergraduate students at the university, and this is something which I've already seen from doing teaching, is that students also are implementing AI more and more creatively for their studies. And so when you see that, then that can kind of inspire you, like actually different ways that you can then use that for your research. So I don't think that we necessarily have this culture where we're very opposed to it. Maybe the only thing that, so some people do say that you know, is AI going to replace chemists, for example? So unless you're worried about your job security, whether or not a computer is going to come along and do the job better than you, I think we're in a good position in terms of our culture to pick it up.
I think that's a legitimate worry from a lot of chemists, I guess. So Michael, can you reassure chemists that AI is not there to replace them? It's there to help them?
Yes, absolutely. So in principle, I agree with everything that Catherine said, and maybe I just want to go a little bit deeper there. So on the job security, actually, when we are working with scientific community, but even in the enterprise, there is actually quite an enthusiasm in introducing the AI. The expectations, however, is from the AI not to take over the decision-making of the people, but rather to simplify the tedious and the routine tasks. I believe that's where AI really shines. And I mean, arguably, everyone would want their AI to do their laundry, right? So from that perspective, I think where it needs to be sensitive is when we are talking about rolling out a tool to a wider organization. And then this is not really specific for AI, but for any new tooling. This needs to be thought through. There needs to be clear expectations. There needs to be good education to the employees what this tool does. There needs to be proper governance. There needs to be piloting phase. There needs to be training along the way to make the proper use of this technology. But this particular thing doesn't set it apart from anything else. You could talk about automation in the cars industry, which does exactly the same. So here I do actually not see that much worries from our customer. I would just want to kind of talk a little bit further what Catherine mentions on the barrier side, maybe on the data side. So a proper data governance, in my opinion, is actually quite fundamental if you really want to roll out a robust AI solution in your environment for numerous reasons. And one, of course, to ensure the data quality. But another reason is also data interoperability. So ideally, you would want, or we see a lot of customers that have accumulated over years of their working a lot of data with a lot of potential for using, because there might be a lot of knowledge obviously there, but simply because, for instance, not enough adherence to standards, they are limiting their data operability, and that significantly hinders its usage in any AI tool. So this is something that actually could be considered as the also strategical move when we are looking more into the future. Another aspect when we are talking about data governance is actually data safety and data security and proper classifications. AI agents trained on not really well classified data can easily be misused by tricking or prompt engineering, revealing sensitive information, whether about patient or about individuals, or even things like IP addresses of networks, which may pose significant problems. So if your environment, for instance, has not invested and has not set up a good process for data governance in order to prevent such events, then this is actually something that could pose a barrier before you start exposing your data to an algorithm.
Okay, thank you. I'll maybe pull on the cost thread a little bit, because I'm sure that's often top of the agenda when it comes to concerns for adoption. So when we talk about cost, there's presumably some sort of onboarding cost, like startup cost, to get the tool up and running, and then there's a license, I guess, for using the tool on an ongoing basis. Is that a cost that people, a substantial cost that people should be really concerned about, or is it a cost that's offset by, saving time and money elsewhere because you've got this tool? Michael, that's probably a better one for you. Catherine's not there yet.
Okay, so again, this is hard to say, because there is a wide range of tools that you can potentially apply. There are definitely costs where you kind of one-time purchase, and then you leverage your own data to train the model, and then it's just about the cost of keeping the tool kind of alive, either on your own infrastructure or in case it's provided by some vendor, of course, paying the license or whatever it is. Whether you will get the actual return of investment from the tool, it really depends how you are using the tool. And that comes again as with any other proper tooling, it comes into analyzing your business, your processes, and identifying the space where you can potentially save the most. In principle, you would be, for instance, if we would be looking into rationalizing the cost of an AI tool for predictive maintenance of your instrumentation, it's quite an easy calculation where you can, based on your business, calculate how much does it cost you a downtime for an instrument, how much analysis you are not able to produce for your customers, how much delay does it mean for your research. You could recalculate it into money and to justify whatever tool that would minimize the risk of your instrument downtime. So it's a difficult question to answer in general.
In abstract, yeah. Okay, so maybe I can ask the people watching if anyone is currently facing barriers to adoption. I'd be interested to know if you want to pop a comment in the box just to let us know what's preventing sort of AI implementation in your own institutions. So let's move on to, and again, we touched on this a little bit in the answer to the first question, but where can AI make the most impact in research? Where are the biggest time savings, if you like, the biggest opportunities for that adoption will create? Catherine, you sort of talked a bit about these, but can you give us some more specifics about where you think there's going to be some quick wins, I guess?
So I think Michael's really on the money in terms of using it to cut down on tedious tasks. I think, for example, if you're doing biophysical assay development, so say you are screening a library of compounds, one of the things that takes ages is looking through those results individually. So I think software which has the potential for automated graphing or automated analysis, or even just picking out hits, I definitely think that would be really helpful. Actually, also what Michael said about reducing instrument downtime, for example. So on a very, very basic level, every lab is very synthetic chemistry focused. And one of my colleagues actually said to me today that one AI tool that she would absolutely love is to have a tool which looks at the stock that we have in our lab, and then it could just pick up when we need to reorder something. So say we need solvents, and we had a tool which would just, we could put in how many we've ordered, how many have arrived, how many we're using, and it could predict our usage over time, and then also just automatically order for us. I mean, it sounds really trivial, but actually I think ordering and getting reagents in for a lab can also be very time consuming. So I definitely think that would be really impactful. I think the third thing for me would be, during my PhD, I think I touched on this a little bit before when I said that I was really analysing a lot of data by eye. And one thing which I always wondered was, is there something inside this data that I'm not picking up on? And so I think what could be really nice would be to have an AI tool that can also search for patterns in the data that are maybe not obvious to the eye, and then that will really give you like deeper insights, which you may not, for patterns that you may not have noticed or just aren't quite able to make the connections yourself. So yeah, I think that's And that's the three areas that would be like of most interest to me, and which I think would be very useful. But I do really want to emphasize that I think Michael's point of just reducing the time-consuming tasks. There are loads of things which you do day to day in the laboratory that they're tedious, and I think efficiency is important, and perhaps also touching on barriers. You asked about whether or not AI would pay for itself, so to speak. I think time is money. And so if researchers are not spending their time doing tedious and repetitive tasks that you could train AI to do for you, then you're going to essentially recoup a lot of money that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Michael, so all the things that Catherine's asked for, are there tools out there that can do those things?
Well, yes, absolutely. When I would even maybe go a little bit further. So when I would think how our customers could benefit from AI, would be like really to streamline the whole discovery journey from hypothesis through experimentation up to the data interpretation, and maybe when we are talking about the tedious aspects where you typically would need to repeat your measurement, your experiment multiple times, readjusting the parameters, reintroducing the sample, say at the different concentrations. All of these currently requires, I would say, manual intervention. Of course, we have robots that do liquid handling, but a lot of the decision making still is with the human. Well, I could envision a streamlined feedback system where the software is integrated and can control the individual hardware units and automatically adjust the parameters of your next experiment based on the data that comes out of the instrument. I believe we are not there quite yet, but ultimately this is where we are going. Still, this does not mean that we are completely putting out the human factor in that. This is still will be needed, but on a much higher level, and not to maybe drive the direction of the individual experiments. So this goes back towards the streamlining of the whole discovery process in the lab. I think the other opportunity would be really to leverage the data that the laboratory already has and has collected throughout the past. Maybe what Catherine mentioned, like to spot the non-obvious. Well, we are now having a systems which can retrospectively inspect the data from 10 years ago and can spot things that are not immediately obvious right now or are not immediately obvious from a single observation. But if you can and have the means to visualize a pattern across, say, years of experiments, you can start uncovering certain trends which may point to different things. It may point to new molecular activities. It may also point to malfunctioning instrument in your lab, whatever. The point is that typically people or humans do not have enough capacity to process these large data sets and typically are focusing their efforts elsewhere. So that's where I think kind of maybe the lower hanging fruit in utilizing purely the software instrumentation, the AI, could help.
Okay. I just want to pull up a slide here, which is kind of related and maybe just leads us on to sort of down an avenue here, which is, so this is Ramendra Singh again, and he's saying that actually in their case, they had to stitch together a bunch of different tools to do the job they needed to do in their work. So maybe if I can ask, again, this is probably for Michael, but is there an element of expectation management here as well about what AI can do and also what it can't do, i.e. there's not one tool that can do everything?
Yes, so I would think, and that's from the practical life experience, you would end up using multiple tools. There's hardly a tool that would fit everything, and you would most likely end up using different tools that you somehow need to interface to each other. And then there are different techniques currently that are using, like, for instance, the knowledge graph, which you can quite elegantly interface different domains and different even language models through the context. There are other tools how you can do that. You can interface the language model and put it in front of a deterministic data processing algorithm, for instance, or even like a database query engine. So you would essentially, this is, I would say, a quite real situation that there is no one single solution that will fit everyone. I think what is really important here is the data standardization, so that you will need to establish a data exchange format between these different pieces that will make it actually work. And it comes back to the standardization and to the proper data governance in your information flow or data flow in your environment.
Okay, that kind of leads us on to the next question, really, and maybe, Catherine, you can pick up on some of that in your answer to this one. So this is about what do people need to do to prepare for AI implementation? You know, can you just go out today and buy something, or do you need to kind of get things ready, get deal ready, if you like, beforehand? So again, this is a quote from an interview we had recently, Dr. Mutlu Dogruel from Cresset, who talks about the fact that if you're going to implement AI, you kind of need to do it wholesale. So you can't really do a bit of it at a time. It needs to be, in his field is drug discovery, so it needs to go across the whole supply chain, if you like. And a little bit from what you just said there, Michael, that it's got to align with the overall goals of the output, if you like, and to a certain extent talk to each other. So Catherine, you're in that state of preparation, if you like. You know, how do you feel you're preparing for any sort of AI implementation?
That's a good question. So I think first of all, definitely you need to identify what your lab's needs are, because I think I mentioned before, one problem can be if you don't choose the right tool for your specific research question. So I think you really need to be clear on what you want to get from it. And I think Michael's completely right. It's probably normal that you will need multiple tools. I mean, even in a laboratory setting, we might do mass spectrometry to get the mass of a compound, and then we do HPLC to determine purity, etc. So I think that's something that we're used to, but definitely identifying where are the gaps that we want to fill. And then I also think Michael's touched on a really good point, which is that you need to have your data organized. You know, I think actually he pointed out a really good point, which is that you could actually go back and reanalyze, 10 years worth of data, but you have to make sure that your lab has got all that data in one place and maybe in one unified format so that you can go on and do it. And then maybe the other thing that I would think is it depends on what AI platform you're using. So if you're using a web-based platform, then probably there's not so much that you need to do because it's just you go in your browser and do it. But if, for example, that involves downloading a software and doing that on your local PC, then you're going to need to make sure that you've got a PC that's powerful enough to do what you want it to do. So maybe it's also thinking about what other components you need to interface and essentially to stitch things together. And perhaps it's also about thinking if it's the case that you're going to need to use a couple of different AI tools, then you need to choose which ones will be complementary to each other.
Sure, Michael, maybe you can pick up on that. You know, what you've sort of overseen maybe and dealt with customers that have implemented AI. You know, presumably there have been some bad experiences as well as good ones. What can people do to prepare?
Yes, so there. I mean, there are two levels of preparation, and one would be, I would say, organizational or business perspective. The other would be the technical. The technical, arguably, being the easier. So you need to ensure the proper access to the data governance. You need to ensure the proper infrastructure for doing the inference. If you are interested, or if you are training or retraining the model, then obviously having a means and ideally a complete MLOps pipeline to continually update your model, to continually recheck whether your inferences do not get out of hand, whether you are still kind of getting high quality, say, inferences or predictions. That is quite crucial. Now, MLOps itself is a complicated topic which combines two, I would say, domains together, namely the DevOps and the ML data management part. So that's, I would say, on the technical part of the thing. On the business side of things, you need really to assess the criticality of the task that you want your AI tool to do. And your, I would say, implementation barrier would usually differ. What is the criticality? If you are only say, in the case where you are using AI Copilot to generate scripts to analyze your data, probably you are not that much worried about the outcome, about the not good say prediction or not good output because you have controls in place in that person, in that scientist that can kind of recheck and validate whether that was a good prediction. But if your business is actually relying on the AI to do the decision, then you probably would need to rethink of the controls you have in place. So that, for instance, your instrument does not get broken, or you are probably even more worrying, you are not passing the outcomes of your prediction to make some serious, say, or to put someone in the risk from the medical kind of perspective. So it really depends a lot to be thoughtful about how you're implementing, to understand what are the benefits that you expect, what is the criticality of the task that you want to offload to the AI, and to have a good controls in place, because the AI tool, right, would always give you some answer, and potentially you need to account for the cases where the answer is wrong and what to do in those cases.
Okay. So just thinking about that, again, pulling on that thread a little bit about preparing for implementation. So who leads this? Maybe this is a question for both of you, really, which is, so, you know, Catherine, you're coming to this. So who's leading that AI charge and the specific implementation that's upcoming? And Michael, maybe the question is, who is best to lead it? Does it need to be a scientist? Does it need to be somebody from the IT department? Is it a team effort to kind of get these things prepared? Catherine, how's it working out for you and your kind of journey at the moment?
Yeah, so I think certainly for academic research labs, in the end, it's to do with what funding you have, right, and what grants you have. So usually that would be the grant holder or the principal investigator who would kind of lead that. But then, so for example, the hierarchy of my lab is that we've got our principal investigator, and then underneath that, there's the postdocs like myself. So probably it's a little bit of back and forwards where the people who are doing the research will then go to the person above, so like the principal investigator, and kind of show them these are the tools that we're looking at, these are what we're interested in. I know for us, in particular, what we want to do would be to start with a trial. So we're looking to get a demo for Deep Mirror, and then what we'll do is we'll have a look at that and see how good is it, can it fulfill our needs? And I think having that picture, I guess what I'm really trying to say is you need to do your research. And so I think having that picture of is it effective will definitely give us an idea about whether or not the cost will kind of be offset by the benefits. And I think I do really like Michael's earlier point, which is that, and I think that's one thing that I have also seen in my research, is that some computational tools that I use, they'll always give me a result. But, you know, if you haven't used the correct parameterization, then it might not necessarily be a meaningful result. So I do think there's a little bit of bearing that in mind.
Okay. And Michael, in the sort of implementation side, who's best to lead it from a platform provision point of view?
Okay, so when we are engaging, for instance, a customer for an implementation, obviously on the customer side, there's a sponsor of the whole effort who typically kind of holds the budget. But then we always engage with the cross-functional teams that has both the scientific aspect. So I would say our actual client who wants to benefit from the solution, but there is always a I would say IT guy or IT team or cybersecurity team ensuring for the compliance and for the proper implementation. There's always a compliance team ensuring that everything is done according to the customer internal functional team. Of course, in terms of features and in terms of piloting, we're usually interfacing with the scientists who kind of benefit from the solution. But more often than not, the technical constraints come from the systems themselves.
Okay.
If we are talking about who is supporting from the provider side, so ideally there would be a project or partner assigned to the client who leads him through the whole process, who coordinates the implementation, and stays there for piloting the project to ensure the proper handover, and most importantly, training and getting the people familiar with that tool. One thing that should be, and I haven't mentioned it before, one thought when you are thinking about implementing AI, you should be prepared to scale out your operation in the future. We need to be prepared for the technologies that come further down. So if you're looking for a method for AI implementation, think of not what is available right now or what your needs are right now, but think more towards the future, 2 to 5 years, and rather think about preparing the infrastructure and ensure interoperability and scaling out of your business.
Which leads us quite nicely onto our sort of last area of discussion. So this is just a heads up for people watching now. If you want to get questions in, you've got about 5 minutes to do that before we turn to those. So again, I'm just going to share a little slide here, which is maybe one of the things to consider. So the last thing to think about is about future proofing, I guess, and where will AI adoption be in a laboratory environment in a few years' time. So this is Ken Lau from the Center for Computational and Systems Biology. And again, he talks about some of the things you've talked about already, which is, and I guess I'm inferring from this quote that actually the adoption of AI might force better data standard homogenization, better getting different tools to talk to each other, because AI kind of requires that to work properly. That might end up being a positive impact, that's not necessarily directly associated with AI, but in order for AI to work, as Catherine said, what goes in defines what you get out, basically, up to a point. So what's likely to change over the next 5 years? It's impossible to predict and an impossible question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Michael, we'll start with you on this one.
So I think what we are going to see that the hardware side of things will start to catch up and become more open and become controllable by the, I would say, software systems that will start governing the whole lab, really from the beginning. So today we have the LIMS systems which manage the data and information flow throughout the lab. I can see that over the time, all of the information, all of the hardware systems, starting from the sample prep through different instrumentation, will become kind of controlled through a central system. Now, AI will play an important role in any of the decision-making steps throughout this journey, as I have already mentioned. So I think we will start seeing more controllable hardware or even like open hardware through these software tools, and the whole laboratory experience will become more streamlined. I 100% agree with the quote on the data accessibility. I think we will start efforts and consolidations of the data and centralizing of the data, because the value that the labs have in their historical data repositories is arguably immense, and there will be efforts to start leveraging that. And with systems for managing large data sets, enabling large-scale queries, and we will start centralization from that point of view. Eventually, I can see that we will start heavily seeing kind of the following up from the concept of the digital twins. We will start to see software impersonations of the instruments that we see in the lab that will be able to simulate the experiment, would be able to predict the outcome, would be predict the failures for the instrumentation. So we would essentially be able to use the digital representations of the instruments and work with them from wherever, which will further then streamline the whole laboratory process. So some of the thoughts, but again, I'll just need to be surprised what will come, because it's difficult to predict right now.
Sure. And I guess, Catherine, you sort of mentioned that because you've got this constant stream of undergraduates who are, generationally, more used to AI and what it can do for them, outside of the lab, even, that sort of adoption might become easier, or it will become less of a scary thing, I guess, as time goes on. Do you feel that already?
I definitely think so, and I think I'd agree with Michael that the culture is in a good place for adopting it. I actually think that there's very little to add to what Michael's already said, but I could definitely envision over the next 5 years, as Michael was saying, so a lot of laboratory instruments require regular services or routine maintenance. So I think if you had an AI tool which could flag like when the instrument needs what being done, I think that would be really helpful. But I definitely think that over the next 5 years as this evolves, definitely the data management will be very important. There's one concern which we have in our lab is if we are using an AI tool for drug discovery, of course, one thing at which we don't really want to talk about openly because of our intellectual property is, for example, in my case, the enzyme that I'm studying, which is involved in antimicrobial resistance, we wouldn't necessarily want to put that out there, nor would we want to put out what our kind of like top small molecule candidates are. So definitely we have to be a little bit aware of, is it possible that that information can be leaked? But I think as a broad overview of what I think could be really useful over the next 5 years, I do think that elaborating drug screening libraries, getting kind of more detailed insights or just different insights from looking at algorithms will be very helpful. And I do think that synthetic chemistry is moving towards using AI to come up with different strategies towards synthesizing a particular compound. So at the moment, chemists will actually sit there and look at the molecule, and we'll decide ourselves what kind of reactions we think we could do to get to our target compound. But already there's a lot of software which is kind of able to do that for you. And I think that's the kind of tool which we'll be seeing kind of coming forward over the years and helping us to streamline our processes.
That gives me a handy opportunity to mention a webcast we've got coming up in a couple of weeks' time, a panel discussion, which is on data in the cloud. So you touched upon security, and that's very much what that's going to be talking about, amongst other things, which is, if you're going to move all your data to the cloud, how do you go about that? What risks are there? What do you need to make sure you do? So a little plug for that in a couple of weeks' time. Okay, so we're kind of at the end of the discussion now. So I just really wanted to ask for some sort of concluding remarks or advice or anything else that we haven't had a chance to kind of touch on through the questions that we've discussed so far. Catherine, what's the next step for you in your AI adoption? I guess having sort of talked about what you want to do and how you might do it and whether you get the funding for it, but what's next? You mentioned trials. Is that the next step for you?
Yes, I definitely would like to do a demo of DeepMirror, the software which I've mentioned. I think just trying it and seeing how it can work will be really, will be really insightful. But I feel like overall, actually, what this has highlighted for me is actually what an exciting time it is right now. Just kind of seeing AI emerge and seeing kind of that trajectory of what it's going to do for labs over the next 10 to 20 years or so on. I do think like the more that you transform the efficiency of a laboratory, the more exciting breakthroughs that you're going to have, because you can actually spend more time really at the crux of your problems rather than doing these menial lab tasks like checking your solvent stocks or like maintaining your instruments yourself, or even as Michael said, perhaps you need to repeat an experiment because say you're doing a 96 well plate athlete and there's some problem with one well on the plate. It will be really nice if there's an AI tool which would go, okay, there's a problem here with this data. We just need to prepare a new plate with the samples, run it again, and just fill in that gap. That would be perfect.
Thank you. And Michael, I guess you share that enthusiasm and excitement about the future of AI?
No, absolutely. So what fascinates me is the amazing versatility, where and how you can apply AI. There is an incredible broad range of tools, and we see coming up new every day, pretty much. What I'm personally very excited, and when we are going, obviously we have a number of product and projects leveraging AI, but I'm always very, very, very excited when actually we work with the customer to explore their particular problem, and then figure out how AI could potentially, AI or any other technology could address exactly their problem, and how we could together come to find to a solution that is innovative, that is yet another use of this technology. And it seems that, again, thanks to the great versatility, there are exciting opportunities coming every day. So I'm very optimistic. I 100% agree with Catherine. I think I would love to give the scientists the tool that would make the the boring tasks less, I would say, time-consuming, and make them focus on really pushing the science even further. And we are, in the company, we are doing what we can to support and to achieve that.
Great. Okay, that's a very nice place to end. So that's the end of our discussion. So if you have enjoyed this discussion, would like to recommend it to someone on your teams, or maybe they can help you secure some budget to get some AI into your own organizations, this panel discussion will be available to watch for 12 months on from our website. So once again, thank you to our sponsor, Thermo Fisher, and to our panelists, Michael and Catherine, and also to my colleague, Robert Rowe, for his help in preparing some content for today. So thanks once again for listening, and goodbye.
Thank you.